Hello everyone, this is Dr. Jawad. In this video I want to talk about our 4 tissue types of our body, and the next section is I create a flow chart basically to put this whole big difficult concept into a little bit of a logarithm that makes it easier to understand. So when we talk about the 4 tissue types, we have 4 different tissue types throughout the body, and they're really determined on their structure and function. So if we take a body tissue and let's cut it in half. Let's start off from the superficial layer down to the deep layer. The superficial layer, like layer number 1, okay, like your skin, that's the epithelial layer. The epithelial layer, the function of it is to create boundaries. It's for security. It's the blanket. It covers the internal and external structures, exposed surfaces, and internal structures. So you have different layers to the epithelial layer. And one of the components of the epithelial layer, it does contain glands. Sometimes you'll have glands that are shoved in between these different structures of the epithelial layer. And the glands produce fluid secretions. Now they're usually attached to the epithelial or they're derived from the epithelial tissue. So then once you break through the basement membrane, because the biggest difference between the connective tissue and the epithelial layer is this basement membrane. So let's bypass the basement membrane, get to another layer, which is the connective tissue. The connective tissue strictly acts as a filler. It fills the internal spaces, it has the structure, the function, it stores and transports materials, it's for structural support, and it's usually made of gel-like structures and fibrous structures. Next, involved in the connective tissue is your muscle tissue. The muscle tissue, the function of muscle tissue is for what? For movement, for muscle contraction, for muscle relaxation. They're named depending on if it's striated or not striated, or if it's involuntary or voluntary. Skeletal muscle tissue, it's striated. Smooth muscle tissue, it's not striated. Cardiac muscle tissue, it's striated. Thing is, skeletal muscle tissue, you can control it, so it's voluntary. Smooth muscle tissue, you're not telling your digestive system to do anything, so it's involuntary. Your heart, you're not telling your heart to beat, so it's involuntary. So what controls all this is the last layer of body tissues, and that's the neural tissue. This is your nervous system. This is the wiring that controls everything. The function of the neural tissue is for communication. Communication of what? Well, basically the brain and the rest of the body. A conduction of electrical impulses from one body part to another. And the main structure, the main functional unit of neural tissue is the neuron. That is basically the link between the brain and the organ system. And you have the neuron, then you have these supporting cells, which are called the neuroglia. The neuroglia are strictly supporting cells of the neuron. So when you put this all together, the first layer is the epithelial layer. It has different layers. You have to break the basement membrane. Then that becomes the what? The connective tissue. The connective tissue layer is strictly for support and protection. Things have to move, so now you got the muscular layer. Is it striated or not striated? Is it voluntary or involuntary? But what controls all of this is the nervous tissue. The basic unit of the neural tissue is the what? The neuron. Okay, so let me put all this together so this whole big concept is easy to flow. Okay, so now let's put this together in a very easy flow chart. You have 4 tissue types. You have your epithelial, you have your connective, you have your muscle, and you have your nervous tissue. So let's start with the easy one. So your muscle tissue divided into 3 different types: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Then you have the nervous tissue, the neural tissue, which is divided into the neurons and the neuroglia. Then we have the 2 main tissue types. Remember, the epithelial is layered and shape, and then once it hits the basement membrane, then that becomes the what? The connective tissue. So with the epithelial, you're looking at one, it's divided into the shape and the layers. If it's one layer, it's simple. If it's more than one layer, it's stratified. What's the shape? Simple squamous, simple cuboidal, and simple columnar. Look at the shape. Is it more than one layer? Then it's stratified, squamous. stratified cuboidal. And now we have this weird, it's a kind of, it looks like it's multiple layers, but not. Typically has cilia, may not. And that is the stratified, okay, pseudo-stratified columnar. Now may have cilia or it may not. And then we have this weird type of tissue that kind of morphs, and that's transitional. Now let's break the surface. Let's break through the basement membrane. Now it's connective. So we have bone and blood. Yes, those are two connective tissues. And now we have fibrous and cartilage. So you have fibrous, you have the loose, dense, reticular, and then you have the cartilage, hyaline, fibrocartilage, and elastic. So this is a nice chart, I'm just going to step out of the way, to put together to make it simplified. Now let's dig into the tissues. Okay, so now let's break it down to the individual types. Remember, so the epithelial layer would be like the surface layer. That covers, that protects. You break the basement membrane, then we're looking at more of the protective, the connective tissue. It has to create movements, so that's muscular layer. It has to communicate with the electrical system, so that's the nervous tissue layer. So when it comes to the epithelial layer, you want to look at how many layers and what shape. So if it's one layer, it's going to be simple. If it's multiple layers, it's going to be stratified. So when it comes down to the shape, does it look like a scale, like almost like a pancake-like? Well, that's called squamous. So if it's a one layer of a pancake, then that's going to be called simple squamous. If it's one layer and it looks like a cube, does it look like a cube? Then it's called simple cuboidal. If it looks like a column, one layer, it's going to be simple columnar. You see how, again, look at the layers and look at the shape. You're going to have three different shapes. Is it kind of like a pancake scale-like? Is it going to be a cube, or is it going to be columnar? Is it going to be column-like? So when it comes to multiple layers, remember, look at how many layers it is. If does it look like multiple pancakes stacked up? Then it's going to be stratified squamous. Is it a bunch of cubes stacked up? Because you're going to see the nucleus. One thing to do, look at the nucleus of the cell, because that's going to tell you really kind of like what it is and the structure of it. So if it's multiple cubes all lined up, then you're looking at stratified cuboidal. Now we're going to have one that's it looks kind of jelly-like. It's going to look like multiple layers, but the key thing is, look at the nucleus. Pseudostratified columnar epithelial. So it looks like a column, but it kind of looks like mashed. And typically, you're going to have pseudostratified ciliated or not ciliated. Is it going to have hair-like structures on it? Well, then that's pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelial. If it doesn't have any hair-like structures, then it's pseudostratified non-ciliated columnar epithelial. Then we're going to have this one that's going to transition. It's going to look like a simple squamous. It's going to look like a cube. It's going to look like a columnar, and that's called transitional. Transitional epithelial. So remember, when you look at the epithelial layers, you want to look at how many layers and the shape. Okay? So now when it comes down to the connective tissue, now let's break through the basement membrane. If we break through the basement membrane, then it's going to be connective tissue, because the function of connective tissue is to support, okay, and protect. So we have different types. So the first kind we have, it's fibrous connective tissue, and it's loose. It actually is areolar loose connective tissue, and the thing about areolar connective tissue is that it looks randomly. Again, it's randomly arranged, and it has all three types of fibers. It has elastin, collagen, and fibroblasts. Next, we have dense. Dense, it's a parallel structure. It looks like lines. Look at the nucleus. See where the nucleus is. It's bundles of collagen fibers. Next is adipose. Adipose is adipose. It looks like fat goblets. So those are the three different types of fibrous connective tissue. Next you have cartilage. Main types is hyaline, fibrocartilage, and elastocartilage. Hyaline cartilage, the thing about hyaline cartilage, it's the most abundant cartilage we have throughout the body. It's the weakest. It's the most abundant and the weakest. Next, we have the fibrocartilage. The thing about the fibrocartilage, okay, it's very, very strong, but it has no perichondrium. And where is fibrocartilage mostly located? The intervertebral discs and the pubic symphysis in between the pelvic bones, the pubic bones. Last is the elastocartilage. Where's elastocartilage located? In your ears, in your nose. So those are the three main types of cartilage with the connective tissue. And then we have this kind of oddball connective tissue, bone connective tissue. You have the compact bone and spongy bone. And also you have blood. Yeah, blood is liquid connective tissue, believe it or not. Next we have the muscle, because everything has to move. So we have the muscle connective tissue. We have three different types, and the muscles for movement, they're categorized by, is it striated? Is it involuntary or involuntary? Is it voluntary or involuntary? So the skeletal muscle tissue, it has striations. It's very linear. It connects to the bone. It's voluntary, okay? And it's striated. Striated is due because of the actin and myosin. Next, you have the smooth muscle. Now, the smooth muscle, this is the muscle that lines the organs. This is the muscle that lines the arterial walls, the organ systems. And it's involuntary. And it's not striated. Next is cardiac. Cardiac is very unique because it's only located in one area. Where? In the heart. It's striated. It's involuntary. You're not telling your heartbeat to beat. And think about cardiac muscle tissue. It has intercalated discs. Intercalated discs, that's really where the communication goes on to make the heart beat. Last, we have the nervous tissue, connective tissue, and we have the neurons, which is the functional unit of the nervous tissue. That's my dog barking. It's okay. Yeah, the nervous... Chester. The neurons, the functional unit, and the neuroglia. The neuroglia, which is the supportive cells of connective tissue. So I hope this helps. Remember, there's four main types: epithelial, connective tissue, we have muscular, and we have the nervous tissue. Okay? Hope this helps. Thanks for watching.